Hello everyone, I am Renowned Zero, and we're going to be taking a look at this article talking about the Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland, former Harvey Weinstein's personal assistant, Leslye Headland. Miss I love all of the Star Wars, even though you don't know anything about Star Wars, clearly. So we're going to take a look at this article again from Bounding into Comics. The Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland points to Star Wars creator George Lucas as an example of the misogyny in the auteur myth. He is the creator of Star Wars. You would not have a job if George Lucas did not create the world of Star Wars. The Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland used Star Wars creator George Lucas as an example of the misogyny in the auteur myth in an Unearthed podcast. Appearing on IndieWire's Filmmaker Toolkit podcast, Headland was asked by the host about a piece she wrote in The Hollywood Reporter where she allegedly challenged the auteur theory. Hope I'm saying that right. She was asked, quote, "This concept less of a voice or author of more than they do it by themselves. Am I wrong about that? Is that in that sense of it's one thing to have vision, it's one thing to have an author, but there's an element of how that comes to life?" That sounded like drivel, by the way. Headland responded, quote, "I think it's also just my experience in the hiring world of being a female writer slash director. Oh, I'm a female director. Yeah, whatever. The number of jobs that I have not gone infinite and the amount of work that I have done to get them is enormous. You haven't done anything worthy of being given a Star Wars show. You've done a bunch of crappy documentaries. And listen, no one said to my face, we don't think you can do this because you're a girl, but I do think there's an idea of what a director looks like." She continued, "And a lot of people will say, no, it's what you do and the cream rises to the top, and just the best person for the job. Yes, we shouldn't give a person who has zero experience in sci-fi a job creating Star Wars. And the only reason I disagree with that is partially because the auteur myth is so strong that it is really what they want to see is a guy come in there who will do everything himself. Yes, we don't want to see an inexperienced, terrible writer, terrible person, by the way, who again was the former personal assistant of Harvey Weinstein, to write a Star Wars show, who basically can say, I will do all of this by myself and it will be perfect and you don't need to worry about everything. Well, considering that the original trilogy for the most part was perfect, I'd rather have George Lucas give me something else. Give me some more Star Wars than you." Headland went on and it justified some crazy behavior. And for the people that are going to say, well, George Lucas gave us the prequel trilogy, I was fine with the prequel trilogy. I grew up with the prequel trilogy, seeing all three releases in theaters, and Revenge of the Sith was fantastic. Not saying it was better than the original trilogy, but I just want to put that in there in case somebody wants to say, well, George Lucas gave it the prequels. Still better than anything that came out of Disney, ever. It justifies, like, I remember somebody telling me something about a male showrunner slash creator type person and their behavior. Just to give an example, by the way, Birds of Prey was written and directed by a woman, and yet they still had to have the John Wick choreographer direct all the fight scenes, because they would have been absolute trash if otherwise. And listen, I'm not perfect by any means, but I think if you set yourself up that way, male or female, you are setting yourself up for failure. You are setting yourself up to fail because there's no way to do something like Russian Doll by yourself. Sorry about the alarm. There's no way to do something like any of the films that I mentioned in that The Hollywood Reporter article. She then shifted the conversation to Star Wars. Quote, "One of the things that I just did recently is I bought all the concept art for Star Wars for the original Star Wars by that great guy. I've forgotten his name, so I just bought the 2-volume book about him and Ralph McQuarrie. That's his name, Jesus. So you can't even remember the guys who did concept art and created Star Wars. Congratulations. Somehow they gave you a Star Wars show to write. Failing upwards. So I've just recently got his 2-volume set of Star Wars concept art from Ralph McQuarrie. And I'm like, this is insane, she remarked. This guy created Star Wars, like really. Like, you see the evolution of the idea from what George is trying to express to him, to what he puts down on a piece of paper, to what it eventually becomes, to why he makes particular decisions, like why he decided to take things in one direction and not the other. Headland then asserted, this is like what we understand to be Star Wars. The idea that, like, that only came from George Lucas, that only George Lucas holds the key for what we understand to be Star Wars is just untrue. No. We understand what Star Wars is because George Lucas is the creator of Star Wars. That is why we like what he does. It's his story. And he specifically says the originals and the prequels are his story. And everything else is fan fiction. Of course, he actually liked a lot of parts of the EU and respected the EU as part of canon, unlike the Disney garbage. And I think the prequels are an excellent example of that. Still better than the sequels. Still better than anything coming out of Disney. But you look at McQuarrie's work and you realize what an indelible mark this man has made on culture by this one role he played on this film. She continued. And the idea that, like, when you're hiring a director, that everyone is sitting in there waiting for George Lucas and not for the person who's going to know to hire Ralph McQuarrie, that's the problem. That's the misogyny and the problem with the ulterior myth as it stands today. Once again, George Lucas is the creator of Star Wars. Because they're not thinking this is the person that will hire the right people, and this is the person that will be able to create the look books and direct people to get them to that place. Empire Strikes Back was pretty much a masterpiece film. He clearly hired the right people for his original trilogy. They're just thinking, do you have all the answers? And the truth is that nobody does, and anybody that says they do is lying. I'm pretty sure if I have to ask anything about Star Wars lore, I would rather ask the guy who created it because he's the one that made it. Headland would later state, whether it's an editor like Thelma or Marcia Lucas, whether it's an editor or production designer like Polly Platt, or if it is an actor, it is a Gwen Verdon or Mia Farrow. The idea that that person is replaceable and the writer/director is something I would challenge, and I would challenge that to myself as well. I would take myself to that task. I am not any more indispensable than my crew is. Ironically, Headland's example makes absolutely no sense given Lucas hired McQuarrie to help pitch Star Wars to Fox. In an interview from the Lucasfilm Vault, the McQuarrie detailed, George Lucas talked about Star Wars and he didn't have a title yet, but the concept for a film that was going to be a big galactic war. And then when he started to talk to Fox, it seemed to him a good idea to have some illustrations to show the scope of the visuals that he planned, which I think in George's mind was a big part of the movie. And I told him that I'd love to do it. So essentially being called out, and there's evidence to the contrary of what she thinks. McQuarrie continued, he and Gary Kurtz came over one day with the script. I started on it the same day, I think. I really got into it right away, working on those original paintings that were really done to sell the film. George and Gary went off, left me doing some more paintings. Fox wanted me to do more paintings. Gary and George went to England, started scouting this whole thing from a budget point of view. Came back 3 or 4 weeks later saying, looks like they're going to do this film. McQuarrie then shared, quote, I never really thought it would be a film while I was working on those original paintings. It seemed so vast a project to me. There was quite a few things set up by George, and I felt I was drawing what he wanted things to look like. I don't think that either of us thought the way the movie was going to look necessarily. These were just sketches that were the best we could do in terms of how we felt it should look, but not necessarily the end product in the sense that this was really going to be it. But it sort of turned out to be it in the end for the most part. Some of those paintings were virtually rendered intact onto the screen in Star Wars for certain scenes. As for Headland's claim that anyone is replaceable, Marcia Lucas would probably agree with her, as she made it clear she did not like what Kathleen Kennedy, Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, and Lucasfilm did to the property. In Howard Kazanjian, A Producer's Life by author J.W. Rinsler, she told him, quote, now that Kathleen Kennedy's running Lucasfilm and making movies, it to me that Kathy Kennedy and J.J. Abrams doesn't have a clue about Star Wars. They don't. They don't get it. J.J. Abrams is writing these stories. When I saw that movie where they kill Han Solo, I was furious. I was furious when they killed Han Solo. Absolutely, positively, there was no rhyme or reason to it. Absolutely not. She added, I thought you don't get the Jedi story. You don't get the magic of Star Wars. You're getting rid of Han Solo, and then at the end of this last one, The Last Jedi, they have Luke disintegrate. They killed Han Solo, they killed Luke Skywalker, and they don't have Princess Leia anymore. And they're spitting out movies every year. And they think it's important to appeal to a women's audience, so now their main character is this female who's supposed to have Jedi powers, but we don't know she got Jedi powers, or who she is. It sucks. Their storylines are terrible. It's terrible. Awful, Lucas concluded. Lucas also noted, she was not the heart of Star Wars. I wouldn't think so. I definitely made scenes work. I made the end battle work. Quote, I definitely had a lot to do with making it work, but I wasn't the writer and I wasn't the director, and I didn't come up with the creative names Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker. All those names are classics. George came up with all of it using his amazing imagination, she said. So essentially Leslye Headland, again, who was Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant, is making up a bunch of BS, claiming that Ralph Query was not hired by Lucas, that he did not help in any way make Star Wars. And this is why we don't like it when stupid people like Leslye Headland, who don't know shit about Star Wars clearly, or any of the history of Star Wars, is allowed to make a Star Wars show that is going to be complete and utter garbage, focusing on this feminist bullshit, and it's going to flop. It's going to be on Disney Plus. No one's going to care about it, and it's a waste of time. At this point, Star Wars is dead. It's a dead franchise. You just keep it buried, stop making movies, and just move on essentially from this property. Thank you all for checking out this video. I really do appreciate all the new subscribers, returning subscribers, new viewers, and returning viewers. If you do like this video, hit that like button. Comment below what you feel about all this. Subscribe for more content. Hit the bell for notifications. Set the bell to all. That way you get notifications anytime I post a new video. And I will see you all on the next one. Peace.